We had a good week last week. We practiced hard for 3 days and took the weekend off, and I got to watch a lot of football games, and we moved up in the polls without playing a game. It's interesting how that works. So we had a good week last week. We always beat bye. We're undefeated against bye. I mean, they never beat us. And in this case, we got to move up in the rankings. Now, come into work on Sunday, and we're back to reality. The truth of the matter is we're playing a very good football team, very talented football team that this year has been hot and cold. In every game they've been hot and cold. Athletic ability is obvious because they beat a Southeast Conference school at their place, so they've got great athletes. And my recollection of last year's game and reality were two different things. My recollection was last year's game was a highly competitive, very close football game that we lost in overtime. Now, that part's true, but I thought the two teams played equally bad or good, whichever way you want to put it. When you watch the film and then look at the statistics, they should have beat us by about 21. They ran the ball better than we ran the ball. They had 240-something yards rushing. We only had 140 yards rushing. They threw the ball for 270 yards. We only threw it for like 160. They had a total offense of 500 and something yards, and we had a total offense of 300 yards. So in reality, the score was close, but in reality, they completely dominated us. Especially, they dominated us up front. So they've got a lot of those same athletes back. I'm sure they've got a lot of confidence that they can beat us because they've beaten us before and beaten us bad. At least physically, they beat us bad. They've got a great coaching staff that did some things last year that we hadn't seen on film that gave us some problems, and I'm sure they'll do it again this year. We're playing at their place. It's the first time a ranked team's played them at home, I've been told. So I'm sure that they'll be excited about playing us, and we're going on the road again. And so the reality of the situation is completely different than what people want to think it is.
Rocky, is their spread different than Cal's spread? Do you have so much experience against these formations now that you have a comfort zone of how to deal with it?
No, everybody lines up in the same formations, but everybody runs different concepts. They have different concepts in the running game. They have different concepts in the passing game. Some of them are the same, but their personalities show up in their concepts. I mean, they've got a play I've never seen before. They've got a play that is a toss sweep, quarterback, power play. I mean, you heard the zone read all the time. This is a read off the end man on the line of scrimmage. If he goes to the pitch guy, the quarterback keeps it, and they block down and pull a guard around and lead the quarterback up in the hole. If the defensive end sits on the quarterback, he pitches the ball, and they run a toss sweep, which is like a bubble screen to them with all three wide receivers out there blocking. So you got three blockers in front of a running back on a toss sweep. I haven't seen that play before. They run it pretty well. They run it not a lot, but they run it pretty well. So everybody has their own personality when they put an offense and defense together, even though the formations might be the same.
You talked earlier this year about comparing this year's Cal game to last year's Cal game. You said, well, they're totally different. I don't compare years. But it seemed to me a couple of moments ago when you were reviewing last year's South Alabama game, there's a little bit of, I don't want to call it anger, but a little bit of frustration in your voice looking back at that game. Seems to me that you are going to try to use that for a little fuel this week.
I mean, anytime somebody beats you, you relish the chance to return the favor. But my idea that last year's game was two teams of similar ability and playing were exactly wrong. They outplayed us bad. And you have to give them credit. And on offense, quarterback's different, but all the other skilled players are exactly the same. 4 of the starting offensive linemen are back. On defense, they have 7 starters coming back. So it's the same players. And I don't know why it would be assumed that it would be different this year than it was last year.
from
How
a
did they win
coaching,
at
from,
Mississippi State? What'd they do?
They outscored them 21-20. I mean, they played well. I mean, they had just as good athletes as Mississippi State did. But like one of their players in their press conference said that they could care less if we're ranked. You know, anybody can beat anybody at any time in college football, and he is exactly right.
from a coaching standpoint, Rocky, when you look back at last year's game, were you guys, you feel like you schematically and everything were ready and you just got outplayed?
No, I think they outcoached us too. I think we got outplayed, especially at the line of scrimmage. We got outplayed, and I already mentioned that they did some things schematically that caused us some problems that they hadn't done before they played us. And I would assume they will do it again. I'm sure they're going to give us some stuff that we haven't practiced against or that we haven't seen on film. They've got a really good coaching staff.
What's your opinion of tight end Joe Everett? You know, he had a big game against you guys last year, and he's already off to another good start.
I think he's an NFL player. He's got great size. He's 6'4", 6'5". He's 240 to 50 pounds. He runs really fast. He catches the ball really well. Now, in their scheme, he doesn't have to block very much. In fact, very seldom is he a true tight end on the line of scrimmage. Most of the time, he's a slot or a wingback. So he's one of those great big wide receiver slash tight end guys that are matchup nightmares. You put a linebacker on him, he can't cover him. You put a DB on him, he can be running right with him, but he can't keep him from catching the football. And I think he set a record last year for them for the season. Caught, I don't know, a bunch of passes for 160 yards against us last year or something.
Rocky at 3-0, and then you have the bye week. Is there any fear that the team comes out flat? And what do you do to prevent that from happening?
I don't think there's any fear at all that we'll come out flat. The fear is how well we'll play. I think a bye week's good for every football team. They come back refreshed. The guys that were kind of beat up and banged up, they're not beat up and banged up anymore. They've had time to recover. They'll be excited about playing. They like to play football. They'll be excited about playing. The real concern is how well they'll play. Because if you go 2 weeks and nothing get but scout team look, all of a sudden you get in the game, and the game is a whole lot faster than practice was. When you play from week to week to week, you don't lose that. Sometimes in a bye week you lose that, and the speed of the game gets to you a little bit, especially early.
You said a couple weeks ago, you thought you were going to have to outscore Cal to win, and you did. Can you afford to get into a shootout with these guys, the fact it's in Mobile, or is it DJ run the ball and don't let their offense on the field?
I think in order for us to maintain where we are right now as far as standings and all that sort of thing, we got to win every game, and it doesn't matter how you have to do it. If they start scoring a lot of points, we got to score a lot of points. If we're having trouble scoring, we got to keep them out of the end zone.
Do you share the South Alabama players' feeling that the ranking doesn't matter at all? This is the first time San Diego State has played a game as a ranked team in many, many years. Do you attach any significance to the ranking? Can it possibly put a little added pressure on your team, or are you able to just completely put it aside?
I don't think it puts any added pressure on our team. I don't think young people of this age think about it that way. I think they're having a great time, everybody patting them on the back, telling them that they're ranked. I think they're enjoying that. I think they think that's exciting. I think they think that's fun. But I also believe that we have mature players, and what their player said is exactly right. I mean, you can put us against any team in the country, and we're liable to beat them, no matter who you put out there. And you can put any Division I college football team against us, and guess what? We're liable to lose. That's just the way the game is.
Rocky, you mentioned moving up in the rankings, even though you had the bye week. The last time you guys were ranked this high was January 1978. Do you remember where you were personally in January 1978?
I was playing in the Canadian Football League. So I remember 1978. I don't remember any of the rankings then, but
You went, oh, San Diego State's in the rankings.
yeah.
And quick follow-up, #1 movie in the country at that time was Saturday Night Fever. Have you seen it, and do you think any of your players have seen it?
I've seen it several times. I mean, I saw it at the movie theater, and I've seen it several times on late night TV. But I would guess our players haven't seen it. Maybe we ought to ask them if they even know who John Travolta is.
Back to the Northern Illinois game for a second. You were up 28-0. They made the run at you, got within 7. Are you upset that they got that close, or are you happy that your guys stuck together on the road, never let them catch you, and held on to win the game?
I'm happy that we won. I did not think we played as well as we need to play in that game. You give them credit for making a run at us, but it could be that we relaxed too. And we were just a good enough football team to put it back in gear and still win the game. I mean, we have a chance to be a very good football team. We haven't played like a really good football team yet. Have not. But we have the ability and we have the chance to be a really good football team. Whether we become one or not, that's yet to be seen.
To add to that, from a coaching standpoint, how do you avoid coming out a little bit more flat after a 28-point lead or a very big lead? How do you avoid having a lapse on the defense?
I don't know how you avoid it. I mean, obviously, you explain it to your players. You tell them what you saw, and you show them on film what you think happened and what you saw on film that kind of proves your point. But we're right back to where they believe what they want to believe now. And part of a coach's job is trying to make them believe what is correct. But so is it with parents, and so is it with teachers. And guess what? You don't always get the right result.
Rocky, I understand that Tom Abels is going to make the trip as a 90-year-old who's been to 770 games or whatever. I don't know how well you know him, but does he add something to the program? I know a lot of times he's on the sidelines. What does he bring to the program? And maybe, especially for the players who are 1/4 of his age.
No, our players all know who Tom is. They all respect his streak. I think they like seeing him on the road. I think they like seeing him at games because he's there almost every time. I think that he adds something to the program. I mean, you'd have to ask them exactly what he means to the program. But, I mean, obviously he's a historian for us, and his record's unbelievable, but our players all know who he is. At times he speaks to them. I mean, he talks to them at times. And I don't mean individually. Sometimes I let him talk to the team.
What's he say?
It depends on I'm sure he's going to talk to the team this week because of the USS Alabama and all that. But it depends on, I don't know, he says different things at different times.
You nervous having a 90-year-old guy on the field that maybe doesn't have quite the moves he does?
I don't worry about any of that. I'm a 66-year-old man on the field, and they could wipe me out at any time too. So if you're on the sidelines, it's at your own risk.
Rocky, I know you guys already beat Cal this year, having lost to them last season, but is there something to a quote-unquote revenge game, at least in terms of the way your players approach it?
I've heard that said, that this is a revenge game. I don't know if it goes from year to year. I think our team wants to win very badly. I don't know if last year's loss has any more to do with this year wanting to win. I don't think our team will have any problem respecting our opponent because of what they did to us last year. I think every year a team's a different team. I think they all have different personalities. I don't necessarily think this group, revenge seems like a really strong word. I mean, to me it does. I don't know if it does to the players or not.
You gave your punter some big-time props after that game, and it's nice to see when your special teams have been really, really good, either kickoff returns or punting and pinning people deep. Is that an overlooked part of the Aztecs' success formula? Because people always talk about offensive and defensive numbers, and they don't really give you a special team.
Yeah, the kicking game is one of those things that nobody talks about until it's bad. And then it's the biggest subject. I mean, a couple, 3 years ago, we couldn't make a field goal, so we went for it on fourth down. So all they did was talk about how bad we were at kicking field goals and extra points, that we had to go for it on fourth down all the time. So it was in the news a bunch then. But when you're pretty good at it, they kind of lose sight of it and maybe don't give it the credit it deserves. We win games around here because when we win games, there's two reasons: that we're pretty good in all three aspects of the game, and we win the turnover battle. We lose games when we lose the turnover battle. Every game we lost last year was because we lost the turnover battle. Every game we won, it was either even or we won the turnover battle.
To Chris's question, beyond the kickers, Rocky, just the coverage and then the return, the offensive return, so to speak, both have seemed to be pretty strong. Is that
I think that's what a team is. I mean, we have a lot of players that think they should be starting that are not starting, but they're starting on special teams. And a lot of them do a really good job. And that's actually a good team atmosphere, because even though they think the coaches are wrong that they should be starting in a certain position, it's their chance to get on the field and play football. So they do a nice job of it, and we have good enough athletes that they're pretty good at it.
What do you think of the passing game at this point? Christian's up there in the conference as far as passing efficiency, but then you look at the passes caught, and it's really, well, Penny and Humphrey and then two receivers. Is that enough balance and enough spreading it out for you, I guess? Have you felt that that's been a strength?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, obviously our plan is to run the football and use play-action pass. If you're going to run the football and that's your primary goal, is to be able to control the football by running it, there's not going to be 70 passes thrown. I mean, I forget how many. I mean, we've had 72 or 73 passes thrown against us in one game this year already. Well, when you throw 70-some passes, you're going to throw it to 5 or 6 different guys. When you only throw 15 to 18 passes a game, guess what? It's only going to go to a couple, 3 guys. And we use the passing game to keep them off the running game, as well as if they want to put a lot of guys to stop the running game, it's all one-on-one out there. So we try to get big plays out of the passing game. So that's our style on offense, and you're probably not going to have 6 to 10 guys catching passes where you would in a team that throws it 70 times a game.
Good call going for it on fourth and maybe a yard and a half, where you had a chip shot field goal. What was the reason on that? It was 14-0 at the time. What was the reasoning for you to go for it? And was the play that Jeff had in mind, did that play into your decision that you felt very comfortable with that play at that time?
I have great confidence in Coach Horton and his staff that when I want to go for it on fourth down, they'll come up with a good play. Going for fourth down plays in those kind of situations are only good if they work. Because obviously if they don't work, everybody in the world that thinks they know football is going to second guess you. But there are times that I still believe that you have to have a feel for the game and not go by the way that people think you should do things. I had a feel in the game that we were going to need to score a lot of points, and it was a chance to get a lot of momentum at the time. And I had faith in the defense. If we didn't get it, I thought that we were close enough down there that we could have stopped them before they scored. So it was kind of a feel thing.
So how does that conversation go? So fourth down comes up, they're waiting for you to decide. You decide before you talk to Horton? How does that work?
Mm-hmm. I called him up and said, I hope you got a play because we're going for it.
What if he says I don't have one?
I don't give him a chance, but I mean, we won. I forget which game it was. One time this year, and he wasn't expecting it, so we had to call timeout. But we still went for it.
Any last questions? for Coach.
Rocky, since you've had a bye week, what have you been doing to work on penalties? Or what, other question, what can you do, or is it just a mental thing?
What do we do to,
Work on penalties, work on what?
we talk about it. And then the coaches, I mean, we talked about it to the players, and then the coaches yell at them every time that we see a penalty on the field. So we try not to let them get away with it during practice. I don't know. I'll say this: there's a lot of times that penalties are based on the attitude of the officials, and it is of utmost importance that players find out what that attitude that the officials have in that game fairly early on in the game, so they know what they can and cannot do. And that's a maturity level. It's the same in every sport, I think. But there's some officials that are nitpicky, and you better know they're nitpicky. And there's some officials that you can yell and scream and cuss, and as long as you don't put your hands on anybody, they're not going to call a penalty. And there's other officials you say, God darn it, and they're going to throw a flag on you. So every game is officiated a little bit different, and it's by the personality of the referee and crew. But you have to figure that out, and if there are the ones that are going to be nitpicky and decide that they're going to clean up the game of football for everybody in the world, you better know that's happening, and you better adjust accordingly. I mean, I've played in games that looked just like our last game when there wasn't one personal foul called or one unsportsmanlike conduct penalty called, and it was exactly the same type of game. So you got to figure out what the official's personality is, and you have to adjust the way you play to the official's personality. Simple as that. I mean, I've played games where offensive linemen hold every single snap. They wrestle guys to the ground. They tackle guys, and not one holding penalty is called. And then I've been in games where 15 holding penalties have been called, and all they're doing is grabbing and keeping their hands inside. So you have to figure that out, and sometimes that's harder the younger you are.
What did you think of the NIU, the play where the NIU kid gets tossed? Did you feel like it was targeting a Christian?
I think by the rules as they are now, it was targeting, because it was the crown of his helmet hitting our quarterback in the face mask and the helmet. But in reality, folks, our quarterback is 5'11", and that guy is 6'4". So to think that he has to change his target down to below the chest is really hard for a guy to do instantaneously. So some of the rules make it almost very, very difficult for the players not to get penalties. Did I think it was targeting by the rules? Yes. By the way the rules are now, yes. But there's a whole bunch of targeting penalties being called that are not. And I don't necessarily agree with the rule.